Riot Games has decided to break their game League of Legends for Linux gamers under the guise of stopping cheaters. If you're playing League on Windows, though, it's much worse for you. As a Linux gamer, the effect is pretty obvious. It's broken. But if you're on Windows, you should be playing something else. Stop playing this game. Just go play Dota 2. Riot Games has never officially supported League on Linux, so it's annoying, but it's not surprising. The surprising part is that they just deployed a rootkit on the computers of the Windows League players. That's why it broke on Linux. Linux is made in a way that they can't force a rootkit on us, so they just broke it instead. For those that don't know what a rootkit is, the term is a combination of root and toolkit. Root is a Unix/Linux term that is the name of the user account with the most permissions on the system. Basically, it means with that level of permission, you can do whatever you want. Toolkit is a collection of software that implements a tool. So that makes sense. Now, when you typically hear the term rootkit, it is often used to describe some kind of malware, but it's not exclusively a malware term. Anything that has that level of permissions is known as a rootkit. Sometimes these are made for developers to debug a system, and there's all sorts of other reasons. So if a piece of software, not a user, has this level of permissions, it's a rootkit, regardless if it's malicious or not. Clearly, this is something that should not be part of installing a video game, but there are even reports of people saying that Riot Games' Vanguard rootkit has been bricking their computers, making them unusable. I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is that Vanguard from Riot Games is a ridiculous overreach. So, what is Vanguard? Vanguard is the name of Riot Games' anti cheat tool. Now, anti cheat tools are kind of understandable. Cheating in competitive online games is a pathetic thing to do, and it's also pretty rampant. I get why they would want to stop cheaters, but Vanguard is not just an anti cheat tool, it's a kernel level anti cheat tool. And it's not just a kernel level anti cheat tool, but a permanent rootkit that you are required to install to play the game. A kernel is the software that effectively makes an operating system work with the hardware of a computer. So it's like the heart or brain of the OS. Kernel level means having access to everything the kernel has access to, which is everything. Anti cheats do not need to have kernel level access. There are many anti cheat tools like Valve's VAC, Blizzard's Warden, and 343 Industries Arbiter that do not need kernel level access to be effective. So, for those that claim it's a necessary evil, no, it's not. The word necessary means you have no other option, but they do. In the blog post where Riot Games announced this rootkit being required to play League, they put a section of frequently asked questions. And in my opinion, the answer to those questions are lame. A lot of what bothered me about these answers is from a perspective of a Linux gamer, but some of them. The first question is, isn't Vanguard spyware? The way that they did this answer, it just saying the words is not enough. I wanted to see if I could try to capture the feeling of what they were trying to say. No, but I'm sure those words in that exact order are mathematically the fastest way to farm retweets. Content algorithms everywhere are programmatically addicted to the click to words, spyware, and rootkit those that they can generate. And mathematically hunting for their next fix has steered them away from informative journalism and into a sort of faux pandemonium that's only remarkable in its unhelpfulness. I hope I captured that well. Get you the essence of what you were trying to say. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I have a lot of experience in many things. When people ask me what I do, I don't like to say entrepreneur because it's vague and kind of strikes me as pretentious. So instead, what I tell people has fluctuated over the years based on what business I'm involved in at the time. I'm one of the co-founders of Tux Digital, so these days I say I'm a media producer. At one point, I was running a marketing and design agency, so I called myself a marketer or designer. All that is to say, as a marketer, that answer I just read to you is what ticked me off enough to make this video. The sneaky marketing used in that answer just, well, they start off the answer with an outright denial, saying it is not spyware. And that is technically correct.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Vanguard is not spyware, because the definition of spyware includes the need for the software to be covert or hiding from the user, aka spying on you. So on the basis that they told you about it, it doesn't technically count as spyware. The rest of their answer, though, that's what bothered me. They conveniently included the term rootkit next to the denial, but without directly denying it being a rootkit. This is just my opinion, but it came across to me that They were trying to get people to associate their denial of spyware as also being a denial of being a rootkit. They also surrounded this convenient inclusion of the term rootkit with language that suggests they are offended by the question, a question they asked themselves. So, yeah, it's not spyware. I agree. But it does qualify for the criteria of a rootkit because it is a toolkit with root-like permissions. I'm not saying it's a malicious toolkit, but it doesn't have to be malicious to be a rootkit. Now, Vanguard isn't the only kernel-level anti-cheat tool. BattlEye and EAC anti-cheat from Epic Games both run at the kernel level. So yeah, I'm not a fan of these rootkits either, but there are some significant differences between these two and Vanguard. While yes, BattlEye and EAC anti-cheat are kernel level, they only run while playing the game, whereas Vanguard is designed to be running all the time. That's right, the moment you turn your computer on, Vanguard is there no matter what. The other big difference, at least for me as a Linux gamer, is that BattlEye and EAC Anti-Cheat work on Linux, so games that use those can be played on Linux. Yes, I do realize I just said something that sounds kind of like a contradiction. Earlier I said Linux is made in a way that they can't force a rootkit on us, so how does a kernel-level anti-cheat like BattlEye and EAC Anti-Cheat work on Linux? That's where the awesomeness of Proton comes in. Proton is essentially a compatibility layer that Valve and a company called Codeweavers made to make Windows games work in Linux. That's right, there are thousands of games that you can play in Linux right now that were not made to be played on Linux. Proton is based on a project called Wine. The purpose of Wine is to run Windows apps in non-Windows systems. Wine also can be used for games, but is not really focused on gaming, which is where Proton comes in. Proton adds things on top for gaming. Now, in order to run Windows apps, one of the things Wine has to do is reverse engineer the Windows kernel, so there's a Wine kernel. This Wine kernel has a bridge made to work with the Linux kernel. So this is what makes it possible for these kernel-level anti-cheats to work while not having access to the Linux kernel because they have access to the Wine kernel. In my opinion, this structure actually makes Linux gaming better because you can get the benefit of the anti-cheat tools without having to deal with them getting the insane permissions that they want. And while we're on the subject, why does Microsoft even let them do this? People are saying they can't move the taskbar anymore. So Microsoft won't let you move the taskbar, but a kernel-level rootkit is okay, apparently? I mean, what? What if I'm personally incompatible with Vanguard? Their answer is, we get it, and we 100% respect your decision. If your beef is only about data privacy at Riot, running the game client or running Vanguard makes not one bit of difference. Makes not one bit of difference. What? Who talks like that? Data can still be retrieved from user mode, and we're all engineers from the same studio with the same goals, none of which are collecting your personal information. If Riot hasn't earned your trust, do not run our software. There it is, the good old trust guilt trip. Now, there is an element of trust in all software and all computing for that matter. You're trusting the operating system to be good to you, you're trusting all the apps that you use to be good to you, and all of the services you use to be good to you. There's a lot of trust involved in using a computer and using the internet and all that. However, kernel level trust is usually exclusive to the developers of the operating system or, the kernel. That part where they say we're all engineers for the same studio with the same goals. It's interesting how you forgot to mention that same studio is owned by Tencent, which is a $70 billion a year mega corporation. So you probably don't have the final say on what happens inside of your company. Oh, and while I was researching this topic, I saw some reports that says your servers were compromised many years ago, but also that it was affecting your players' personal data, and you seemingly forgot to tell people about it for at least a year or so. So, trust. People not wanting to give kernel level access of their computer to random people and some random game company owned by a mega corporation, that's not paranoia. That's just called having good sense. I mean, what if you hire someone who you thought was a good person, but really they were just pretending so they could get access to this kernel level rootkit that you put in every player's computer that runs at all times? It's not about trusting you. It's about making good decisions, and people shouldn't have to voluntarily install a rootkit to play a video game. Another answer that didn't sit well with me, with my marketer side that is, was about the Linux support. It says, what about Linux? We've never officially supported Linux, and it's true that the current Lutris-based implementation for League that uses Wine will not be able to satisfy the Vanguard driver requirements. Linux does not currently afford us sufficient ability to attest boot state or kernel modules. Good job to all the devs who made kernel level stuff not be an option. Thank you for that. And the difficulty in securing it is only compounded by all the frustrating differences between distributions. Well, Valve's Steam client works on any Linux distro, so that's clearly wrong. Even allowing emulation is an exceptionally dangerous game, as many cheats could just then run on the host, manipulating or analyzing the VM in a way that would be invisible to Vanguard within it. There are so many things wrong with this. First, just use Proton. Proton is not emulation, so your complaint about that is irrelevant. Then you say VM as in virtual machine or virtualization, and emulation and virtualization are different things. Half of anti-cheat is making sure the environment hasn't been tampered with, and this is extremely hard on Linux by design. Again, good job, Linux devs. They act like that's a bad thing. It's not. Oh my goodness. Any backdoors we leave open for it are ones developers will immediately leverage for cheats. That's so funny. You're actually admitting you want to have backdoors into people's computers. You don't. Okay. And yesterday, there were just over 800 Linux users on League. We have evaluated this risk to not be worth the payoff. Here we go. This is the part that I wanted to talk to you about. The marketer side of Michael was very annoyed by, because a lot of companies like to claim that Linux is not big enough to be worth the payoff. This isn't just gaming companies. It also applies to app companies too. But that 800 players on Linux looks pretty small, huh? Well, that's because they're hoping you just see that number and ignore everything else. It said "and yesterday." So that 800 Linux gamers applies to a single day. There's more League players on Linux, obviously, because not everyone will be playing on that one day. This is enough to show they are misleading, but my frustration skyrockets because they are trying to say it's not worth it. I like to remind you of the beginning of this answer. We've never officially supported Linux. And the part of the Lutris-based implementation for League, they're ignoring that in order to be one of those 800 Linux gamers, those people had to jump through a bunch of hoops and deal with a bunch of headaches to play their game. You know, they said they never supported Linux. The Lutris team are awesome. There are a bunch of awesome people making it possible to play games on Linux, even when the game devs refuse to care about our platform. Thank you so much, Lutris. Here's a list of what was needed for Linux gamers to do in order to play this game. Again, thanks to Lutris for making this so much easier, but this is a lot of stuff. I talked to one of the Lutris devs that worked on this, who goes by the name Glorious Eggroll, and he said that Riot Games also broke it quite often with updates. So he had to frequently fix things. And by the way, he's going to be on my podcast soon for an interview, so go to destinationlinux.net to subscribe for that. So, Riot Games, you are telling me that over 800 people in a single day were so interested in playing your game that they were willing to jump through those hoops and have those headaches to play a game on a platform you never bothered to care about. And you don't realize how big the gamer base would be if you just made it possible to click a button that says play? Really? In addition to the tragic logic they're using to pretend the gamer base is small, there's also the part where they claim Linux is too dangerous, because cheats would be made as if that would be an easy thing to do. This would be a very, very hard thing to do. This would require developers to have understanding of writing code for Windows, writing code for Linux. They would also have to know how Wine works. They would have to know how Proton works. They would have to know the differences between Wine and Proton. They would have to understand how the bridge between Wine and Proton works to connect to the Linux kernel. And that's just the stuff I can think of off the top of my head. There's even more things of having to change the Wine kernel. It's like, and how those things happen, trigger the anti-cheat super fast. Like, it's a massive mountain to climb. I mean, even just knowing how to write software or games or code or whatever for Windows and Linux, that's already a lot. But then you have even more necessary for all the other stuff with the Wine and Proton and the bridge stuff. Like, This would be such a massive thing to attempt. I would probably say that most people who are in this space making this kinds of software would evaluate this risk to not be worth the payoff. It's not like Vanguard is even a foolproof system to stop cheaters on Windows. Something else that would be invisible to Vanguard is someone using a second computer to run the cheats. Someone having two computers is also not that ridiculous. It wouldn't take that much to run these kinds of things. Just a laptop would probably do it. In fact, a lot of streamers already do this two computer thing. They have one computer for the gaming and one computer for streaming. And now that I think about it, I remember when first-person shooters started getting cheaters on the monitors. Like, monitor companies were helping people cheat. They would put crosshairs directly on the monitor. So if a game removed the crosshair, it wouldn't matter. It would still be there on the monitor. Now, I haven't looked up monitor cheats in a long time. Actually, I wonder what's out there now. Okay. I love this. Now, technically, thinking about what this implies, I don't like it. But I love the timing of this, the trolling of this. This MSI announced a monitor. I didn't know this. They announced a monitor at CES that basically uses AI to help people cheat. It's an AI-powered cheating monitor, and the game that they show for the demo of it cheating is League of Legends. That's beautiful. I mean, it's not good that they're making this sort of thing, but it's oh my goodness. But also, I mean, MSI, it's not really a good thing to do, but it is funny. It is very funny. And for those who are wondering, like, couldn't you just ban the monitor? I mean, they could just send the signal to the kernel telling it it's a different monitor, like a monitor that is similar, has similar specs, but isn't that particular one. So there's really no way to actually stop it. So in the case of that monitor, I don't even know what you could possibly do, but most people aren't going to be going out to buy a monitor for this particular purpose. Maybe some would, but most wouldn't. And in the case of most cheats, they're kind of annoying to set up, especially why you wouldn't have any reason not to support Linux. But there are many ways to stop cheaters. It'd be more effective than having a kernel level anti-cheat to use statistics of a player, like in the case of a first-person shooter. Like with an FPS, people who have 97% headshot accuracy are clearly cheating, since that is not even humanly possible to do. And I'm sure League has some kind of thing that humans simply can't do, and use that as a reference point for the bans. Now, some games have community report systems, and there's other techniques to do banning. But also, I noticed that you're ending your games while they're happening and telling people it was because of a cheater, which is effectively telling the cheater that they're there and you're stopping the game right then. Doesn't that help the cheat developers? Because they can just check to see what causes the detection. That's the point of ban waves, so that they can't use any data to test it. They collect all the accounts to ban, and then they do it in a big scope, a big wave of banning, so they don't let anybody be able to test and see what triggered it. I mean, there's so many things wrong with this. Here's the last answer that I want to talk about from their frequently asked questions. What about OS 10? OS 10. Really? Maybe they aren't trying to mislead people about Linux with the marketing spin stuff. They might just be clueless because they don't even know the name of Apple's OS. They make a game for it and they don't know what it's called. I don't know. Their answer says, there isn't yet as much tooling on OS 10, Mac OS, for script development, although the need is growing. For now, Mac won't have Vanguard. Let me get this straight. So Linux gamers can't play because it's too dangerous, or whatever, even though making cheats on Linux would be absurdly difficult through Proton and all of that stuff that we already talked about. But you made a native Mac version that doesn't have Vanguard at all.
Stop it. Get some help.
Once again, I like to bring your attention to Dota 2. It's a game, doesn't require you to have ridiculous rootkit in your system, and people seem to love it. Some people like it more than League. So if you haven't checked it out, Dota 2.